Alright, for today's critical thought, we're going to be talking about stealth game design, and an unusual variation we've seen grow in popularity over the last few years. Now, chances are for those of you watching this, you are more than well aware of stealth gameplay. Hiding behind corners, cardboard boxes, avoiding danger, and generally trying not to get detected by whatever is out to get you. And we have seen many games follow the traditional stealth route, from titles like Thief, Metal Gear Solid, and of course the horror genre has really made use of stealth design, from games like Alien Isolation, Outlast, Amnesia, Slender Man, and you can pretty much throw a pebble at the indie horror category and you'll find a game that makes use of it. And the reason, of course, is that stealth is a very useful way of depowering the player. You're putting them in a situation where they can't easily fight their way out of, if at any reasonable way of fighting. And a popular tradition of action games, especially during the late 90s, early 2000s, was to have the infamous stealth level, where the player loses all their weapons and items, and then they have to get out of a jail cell or get their gear back without being caught by the enemies. Now, when it comes to stealth gameplay, we've talked about some of the problems or some of the major issues when it becomes too black and white, where you must either play the game exactly X, Y, and Z, or you're going to get spotted and you have to restart the whole thing. Now, some games have offered different variations of that balance between being weak and strong. Games like Thief, for instance, Geralt has a number of tools available to him, but he's not the best fighter. While in a game like Alien Isolation, you can fight most of the enemies in that game and beat them, except for when the Xenomorph arrives to mess with your day. And then there are, of course, games that give you no options to fight, such as Clock Tower and Haunting Ground, and again, all the indie games we can talk about, where it just becomes essentially a pseudo puzzle of how do I get from A to B without being spotted and therefore killed. But the example that I want to talk about for today's critical thought is on the opposite end of the spectrum, and we're going to coin the term Apex Predator Stealth Design. And I'm not the one to coin that. It was first brought up during descriptions or interviews from Rocksteady when they were describing Batman Arkham Asylum for the first time. And if you watched the recent Dissecting Design on it, you know we talked about it there. But the idea of an Apex Predator stealth is that instead of putting the player in a position where they're weak, it is the complete opposite. They're in a position where the stealth isn't a means of avoiding danger or being scared. It's about putting you in a position of power and basically allowing you to dictate how things go. And there have been a few examples of this over the years. Again, most famously would be the Arkham series. Batman, as we all know, could never be described as a weak character. So it doesn't make sense to put in stealth gameplay where Batman is hiding behind boxes waiting for guards to turn around. Instead, as the Apex Predator, Batman has complete range in terms of how he instigates conflict and gets into fighting. You can glide down and kick an enemy off a railing. You can use a back claw to pull them off or pull the gun out of their hands. You can set up explosive gel proximity explosions and so on. But the idea is that instead of stealth being treated as a puzzle that you must do this in this specific order to win, it's viewed more as a sandbox. And that's kind of the key trait of this kind of Apex Predator stealth design. The Arkham series turns the stealth challenges into this whole fun playground of how do I quickly get around to take these guys out, obviously not being detected, but again being creative with how we do this. And with Batman, even if you do get detected, it's not game over like we see in other stealth-based titles. You can sometimes just fight the enemies there. You can escape, you can throw down his pad and smoke pellets, and so on. The point is, the player is not weak in this kind of stealth design. They are the strongest character on the field. It's almost, and I think this was even used in the Roxay example, the player is essentially the monster in the horror movie. They're picking apart the people one at a time, they're hiding in the shadows waiting to strike, but they're not hiding because they're weak. They're just waiting for the prime opportunity to engage. Now, other games that have made use of this kind of Apex Predator stealth design have also gone in similar options with making the character be all powerful. Another big example would be in Shadows of Mordor, where your main character is basically an orc killing machine, and you have a number of ways of doing it. And while you may start out on the weaker side to begin with, your abilities will quickly overcome and pretty much lap the enemies in terms of their powers. About halfway through Shadows of Mordor, you'll gain the ability to teleport stealth kill across an area, jump down, just behead 3 orcs like they're nothing, and if bosses or the nemesis characters are weak to a specific kill, you can just jump in and wipe out a nemesis character, again, like it was as easy as shooting fish in a barrel. But once again, the point about this kind of design is that the player is still in command. And stealth is not used as a forced option. If you want to be aggressive, you can. It, of course, will make things harder for you. But the stealth, again, rewards you in a ways of just dominating the battlefield. Now, with that said, though, there are some games that really skirt that line between what is and what isn't Apex Predator design. The Hitman series being one of the most notable. In Hitman, you are free to go about your business and wait for that prime opportunity to strike. But the player is still being commanded, in a manner of speaking, by what's going on. Even games where you are playing as powerful characters can still limit you in terms of stealth, such as Invisible Ink, where you play as a group of badass spies in a cyberpunk future, but you still can't directly engage, and in many cases you are punished for being the aggressor. The point about this kind of Apex design is that, again, it treats the stealth gameplay as a sandbox rather than as a puzzle or an obstacle. And that's why no matter how many tools you give someone like Geralt, the levels in Thief are still designed primarily around you being on the defensive. Now, one of the challenges of this this design is that the player still has to retain that element of surprise. We've seen some action games go, again, with trying to balance stealth and action too far on the action route, wherein the player just runs behind an enemy, snaps their neck, and just repeats the process for 5-10 minutes. All the enemies are dead, we can now do the level proper. The idea again is that the stealth options are viable and you still have to remain stealthy, but you are given a far greater range of actions to do it with. Now, earlier I said that the Metal Gear Solid series would be more on the traditional stealth side, but later Metal Gear games did give the player more freedom and range of options when it came to being stealthy, such as Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and from what I've seen of play of Metal Gear Solid 5, which kind of continues that tradition of you have this big open area, you need to complete an objective, go nuts. You can do whatever you want in that area to try and achieve it. Do you want to run in guns blazing? Do you want to take guys out one at a time? Do you want to do a mixture of the two? And again, with the Metal Gear series, penchant for crazy situations and viable tactics. But again, this kind of design, for me, I really enjoy it because it is about giving the player power while still rewarding them for being stealthy. But with that said, though, there are some obvious disadvantages and risks you have to weigh. The big one is that when the player is all powerful, it does rob the stealth of some of its agency. As Batman, for instance, one room of armed guards is just the same as the next and the next and so on. And given the amount of power Batman has, you don't really have to get creative. In fact, playing through the story mode, you can pretty much repeat the same thing of sneak behind an enemy, choke them, hide, sneak around the next enemy, and repeat until the room is cleared. And that's another major point. If you try to make the stealth too demanding, as in requiring the player to do certain abilities or certain takedowns, we then fall back into the puzzle side of things. But you can get creative with that, such as with the Mr. Freeze fight in Arkham City. With that said, though, I think we'll wrap things up here for today because there aren't too many examples of games that go with this route, especially in the modern market, with a lot of games following suit with the indie horror franchise or indie horror phase of the player can't do anything. But to wrap things up, Apex Predator Stealth Game Design is a way of giving the player the option of being stealthy, but instead of making them feel defenseless or on the weak side, they are the most powerful player on the board. And it becomes less about you trying to sneak around enemies and more about what creative ways you can use to complete your objective. And when it works, it delivers a completely different dynamic compared to other games with stealth options. But unless you really get creative with the options you give the players as well as the enemies you design, it can become very repetitive to be the most powerful guy on the field. With that said, thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know if you have any suggestions for future topics. And be sure to check back daily for more discussions on game design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and come back nightly around 10 Eastern for regular game streams. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game design topics, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. You can follow me on Twitter at GWBicer for updates from me throughout the day. And be sure to check out our Patreon campaign. You can find us on Patreon under GWBicer for ways to not only support Game Wisdom, but you can get access to our Discord channel where we'll talk game design topics, as well as allow you to vote for our Saturday night grab bag stream. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the next video here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.